The wind screamed across the dead plains of Kareth 7, kicking up dust and broken bone beneath a sky that still smoldered from old wars. The sun was bleeding out behind twisted metal towers, the horizon lined with the burnt-out wreckage of harvest. Drones and shattered fences. This place had once fed millions. Now it was a graveyard, a borderland of forgotten people. Soraya knelt in the dirt beside the fence. Her knees scraped raw, her long silver hair clinging to her sweat-streaked skin. Her dress, what was left of it, clung to her like a memory. Of dignity, she had once been luminous, Elisa reborn, descended from the crystal cities of the Arlen Belt. But now she was only flesh, exhausted and starving. Her eyes burned from dust and sleeplessness, but she did not cry. She hadn't cried in days. She was saving her strength for the only thing that mattered now. Her daughter Ilari was little more than a whisper of life pressed against her side. Pale hair, tiny hands, a fragile rib cage rising and falling too slowly. The child hadn't spoken in a day, not since the last food ran out. Soraya could feel her heartbeat slowing through the girl's skin. Hunger had its grip on her now. Soraya lifted her head as she heard the crunch of boots. A figure approached, massive, armored, and very human. He moved like a ghost across the war-blasted road, shadows trailing his every step. Tactical webbing clung to his body. A rifle was slung over his back, and something cold and old flickered behind his eyes. She pushed Ilari behind her with trembling hands. The man stopped a few meters away, his silhouette framed against the rusted remains of a patrol drone. His gaze fell on the child, then on her. He made no move for his weapon. "Your human federation," she said, voice thin. "Was he?" replied. "Not anymore." She stared at him. His presence was heavy, like the silence before a thunderstrike. Her voice cracked. "I have nothing left," she said. "No food. No shelter." She straightened slowly, letting her fingers rest against her thigh. Her voice became steadier. "Just one night with me. Let my daughter eat. That's the deal." Tss. Words hung in the air like poison. The man didn't blink, didn't move. "You think I want that from you?" said voice low. "Every man has," she whispered. He stepped closer. She tensed. But he didn't reach for her. He didn't even raise his hand. He crouched, pulled a ration pack from his gear and set it gently on the ground. "Let her eat first." The child blinked up at him. Ilari looked to her mother, then dove on the food, tearing it open with frantic hands. She ate like she'd forgotten how. Soraya's breath hitched. She stared at the man, then looked away, ashamed of the tears stinging. Her eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Because I remember what it's like," he said. "To lose everything." She looked up again, really seeing him now. The scars. The exhaustion. The long, haunted stare of someone who had stood too long on the edge of hell and come back with the fire still clinging to his bones. "I don't need your body," he added. "I need you to survive. Both of you." She covered her mouth with her hand. The tears came silently. She hated them, but she didn't stop them. He stood and gestured toward the hills. "I have shelter. It's not much, but it's warm." She hesitated. Then she stood, gathered her daughter into her arms, and followed him into the twilight. They crossed the edge of the exclusion zone as the wind began to rise. Sira's legs nearly gave out 3 times, but the man who hadn't even given his name waited each time without a word. By the time they reached the bunker entrance, night had fallen like a curtain of smoke. The shelter was half buried beneath a hill of broken shale, hidden beneath camouflage netting. Inside, the air was warmer, filtered, safe. There was power, water, a cot, medical supplies, a storage unit with food. He handed her a thermal blanket, showed her where to rest. She sat down slowly. Ilari curled up in her arms. "What do you want from us?" she asked again. "Nothing. People don't do things for nothing." He didn't look at her. He just stood near the wall, arms crossed, eyes distant. "My wife and son were killed on a farming moon," he said. "Federation couldn't protect them. Raiders didn't care. I've been fighting ever since, and helping me brings them back, she asked, bitterness slipping through. No, but maybe it brings me back. That silence stretched again. Then, finally, she spoke, quieter now. Thank you. He nodded once. Get some rest. And she did. For the first time in weeks, she let her eyes close, knowing someone else was watching the door the next morning. The sound of distant engines stirred her from sleep. The man was already armored and armed. He stood at the mouth of the bunker, scanning the ridge through his scope. Trouble? She asked. Raiders, black shard, 12 men, armored. Scouting formation. Her stomach dropped. They'll come here, and if I draw them away, you can't fight them alone. I have before. She rose, her hair wild around her face. He gave us safety. Tss. And now you'll throw your life away for it. He turned to her, his face unreadable. If I die, you live. That's a trade I'll make. You said you didn't want anything, she snapped. I still don't. He moved to the door. She caught his arm. Come back, she said. He looked at her, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Tether made of pain and grace and understanding. I'll try. Right. Then he vanished into the dust, and she was left in the silence again. But this time, it wasn't the same silence. Because someone had chosen her and her daughter. Not for a night, but for something that might still matter. The sun rose like a bruised eye over the horizon, bleeding pale gold across the wastelands. Soraya stood at the bunker's threshold, the cracked earth stretching out before her like the hide of some ancient beast. Her arms were wrapped tight around Alari, who was still sleeping, cheeks fuller now with food in her belly. But Soraya's gaze was locked on the place where the man had vanished hours ago, into the scorched canyons beyond the ridge. He hadn't told her his name. He hadn't promised to come back. And still, she waited. The Federation had burned this region clean years ago. But the Black Shard Raiders were like mold. They returned to what was wounded and ripe for plundering. They took food, fuel, and flesh. And the man, her strange, quiet savior, had gone to fight them alone. Soraya's fingers tightened around the doorway frame. She couldn't stand still. Every noise on the wind set her heart hammering. The bunker's radio was long-range silent, dead for years. There was no cavalry, no reinforcements. There was only hope, and that was as fragile as glass in this world. When the shots came, they echoed sharp and distant through the canyons. Pulse rifles, then heavier cannon fire. Explosions. She flinched with each sound. Last time she'd heard a battle like that, her father had died. Else. That was before the camps, before the sickness, before she'd sold the last of her heirlooms for a half-loaf of bread and a fake ID. Chipped up the minutes stretched into hours, then silence, and she broke Soraya. Wrapped Alari in the thermal blanket, and set her inside the shelter's back alcove. The child stirred but did not wake. She grabbed the spare rifle the man had left, outdated but functional, and headed toward the ridge. She didn't know how to use it properly. Didn't care. What mattered was finding his body, or saving his life. She couldn't sit and wait, like some helpless thing. Not anymore. She crested the ridge and froze. Bodies, burned-out hoverbikes, added Raider insignias, at her, and standing in the center of the smoking battlefield, covered in blood and dust, was him. The man. His armor was scorched, one arm bleeding badly, but he was alive. Breathing, still holding his rifle. His eyes found her immediately, as though he'd sensed her coming. You shouldn't be here, he said hoarsely. You came back, she whispered. He collapsed to one knee. She ran to him. They didn't speak as she helped him down the ridge. His arm draped over her shoulders. He was too heavy for her, but adrenaline pushed her legs forward, step after grinding step. Inside the bunker, she stripped off his armor, cleaned the wound on his arm, and stitched it closed with trembling hands. He didn't make a sound. Stared at her with those cold, endlessly tired eyes. Why do you keep risking your life for us? She asked at last. He didn't answer right away. Then quietly he said, because I remember what it felt like to be abandoned. She paused, wiping blood from his shoulder. "My name's Soraya," she said. "My daughter is Alari." He nodded once. Cale, he sat in silence. That night, Cale slept on the cot, still feverish, while Soraya watched over him from a corner of the room. She kept the rifle close, though she doubted she'd know how to use it if someone stormed the place. Alari curled up beside her, dreaming deep and safe, in the days that followed. Cale's wound closed, but the ache in his bones remained. Soraya tended to him. She learned to maintain the bunker's systems, filtered water, and even cooked using the emergency rations. She began to laugh again, quietly. When Alari made faces or mimicked Cale's silent, brooding expressions, Cale stayed mostly quiet. But something had shifted in him. She caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't watching. The way her hair moved when she stirred the pot, or the way her voice softened when she soothed Alari to sleep. Once she passed close to him, and their arms brushed. His entire body stilled, as if the context startled him more than any battle. He pulled away first. Soraya tried not to feel the ache of that rejection. He was a soldier, she reminded herself, a broken one. She couldn't expect warmth, couldn't expect anything. But then, late one night, she heard footsteps pacing near the bunker entrance. She rose and found him standing outside looking up at the stars. "You can't sleep," she said gently. He didn't look at her. "I used to stare at the stars with my boy." She joined him, arms folded. What happened to him? Cale was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly he said, "The raiders thought my wife had intel on a Federation prototype. She didn't. They took her. Took my son. Arrived too late." Soraya touched his arm. "I'm sorry." He turned to her slowly. "Why didn't you give up?" he asked. She gave a bitter smile. "Because she needs me, and I need something to hope for." He looked down at her hand on his arm. Slowly, he placed his own over it. The warmth lingered. A quiet tether formed there. Something fragile but real. When he turned to go back inside, she followed him. They didn't speak of what had passed between them, not then. But that night, he left the cot for her and slept beside the bunker entrance, rifle by his side, a protector. A man waking up from years of being numb, the days grew warmer. Raids became more frequent across the sector, though Cale's remote position and use of signal dampeners kept them hidden. He trained Soraya in the use of a weapon just in case, he said, but his hands on hers during the lessons made her heart pound for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. He never touched her beyond that, never took advantage. But every glance lingered a little longer. Every silence between them became more electric. One night, as they repaired a broken wind turbine above the shelter, she asked him if things were different. "Would you have stayed a soldier?" He didn't answer at first. Then he looked at her, eyes heavy. "I think I was waiting for something worth staying for." She didn't dare ask if she and Alari were that something, but she hoped. The moment came days later. A Federation recon drone passed near the shelter. Cale spotted it. The ID tag confirmed a friendly signal, but he didn't trust it. Federation had too many eyes, and too many of them were corrupt. He debated running again, deeper into the Badlands. But Soraya stopped him. "You don't have to run anymore," she said. "They'll find me. And they'll take you and Alari or worse. Then we stay hidden," she replied. "Together." He looked at her, really looked. "You mean that? Do." She reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. Their fingers laced, and Cale realized with startling clarity that the woman he had saved was now saving him. From the man he had become. From the guilt. From the loneliness that night. They shared more than a glance. In the quiet shadows of the bunker, Soraya touched the scars across his chest and whispered her name into his skin. Cale, in turn, touched her like something sacred, not owned, not owed. They came together like a sunrise after years of darkness, soft and slow, and full of the promise of something not yet broken. It wasn't about passion, it was about healing, about making space in their broken hearts for something whole. They didn't speak afterward. They didn't need to, but the way Cale curled protectively around her and Alari, as they slept, said everything. He was no longer a man alone, and she was no longer a mother begging for scraps. They're a family now, not bound by blood but by choice. And the storm brewing on the horizon, it face it together? The next morning brought the dust storm. Cale had predicted it, the reddish tint to the clouds, the static in the air, the subtle shift in the wind's mood. But it still hit harder than expected. Sand hissed against the shelters, reinforced. Doors like angry whispers. Side the solar feeds flickered once, then stabilized. Alari hid under a pile of worn blankets, while Soraya reinforced the vents with Cale's guidance. They moved together with practiced efficiency, now like partners. When the power surged again, Cale frowned and activated the bunker's deep scan relay. Soraya stood behind him, arms crossed, concern etched across her features. Another surge? She asked. Cale's jaw tightened. Not natural. Something's causing interference. She tilted her head. The drone? He shook his head slowly. Bigger. Military-grade signal dampeners don't fail like this, unless someone is actively working to expose the location. Someone's hunting us? No, he said grimly. They're hunting me. That night, Cale watched the wind from the entryway. Visor pulled down over one eye, scanning for movement through the reddish blur of the storm. The desert was a churning sea of sand and shadow. But something moved within its shapes to angular, too deliberate. Then came the unmistakable click of a long-range tracker ping. He froze. Pack what you can, he told Soraya. We leave in 10. But the storm, they'll come anyway. They found us. She moved quickly, gathering food rations, energy cells, Alari's blanket. Cale armed the fallback hover sled and loaded it with spare fuel. He had planned for this. But planning and living it were two different beasts. Alari clung to Soraya, his eyes wide, sensing the tension. Are we running again? She asked quietly. Soraya forced a smile. We're going on a ride. The moment the doors opened, the sand shrieked in their faces. Cale led them out, his body shielding them from the worst of it. They drove blind for an hour, wind slashing at their skin, until they reached a narrow crevasse Cale had marked months ago as a fallback zone. Underground cistern, shouted above the storm. Prefed design, they won't find us easily. Inside, the old water chamber smelled of iron and dust. But it was dry, and it was hidden. They huddled in the dark, wrapped in thermal blankets. Soraya pressed her forehead to Cale's shoulder. I thought we were safe, she whispered. Cale's voice was quiet. We were, until I stayed too long. Think it's your fault, he nodded. But she took his hand. No, it's not. Alari curled up between them, and Cale found himself holding both their hands. He didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the dark, feeling the weight of them. It's like anchors tethering him to a world he didn't dare lose. At dawn, the storm began to lift. They emerged cautiously, goggles on, rifles loaded. Cale scanned the sky. Ship had landed. Sleek. Black. Marked with the sigil of House Endereth, a rogue mercenary faction. Made rich by selling fugitives to the highest bidder. He cursed under his breath. What is it? Dara asked. They're not here to capture me. Then what? They're here to erase me. Cale moved quickly, setting up sensor mines in the canyon walls. He handed Soraya a pulse knife. You stay with Alari. If anyone gets close, stab first. Questions later. I'm not letting you go out there alone. You have to for her. There. Eyes locked, an entire conversation unspoken. She hated it. But she nodded. Cale kissed her forehead. Kissed Alari's hair. Then he vanished into the rising heat. The mercs came in like ghosts. Precision-trained, stealth gear. But Cale had fought them before. He knew how they fought, knew where they'd split their units. He'd pick them off one by one, silent kills. Quick and brutal, but he was only one man. The leader, a woman named Virith. Found the shelter before Cale could intercept her. Soraya stood between the child and the doorway. Pulse knife raised. Virith sneered. You're not Federation. Who are you to protect him? I'm the reason he stayed human, Soraya said. Then she threw the knife. It missed, but only barely. Verith lunged. Soraya slammed her elbow into the woman's throat and tackled her. To the ground, they rolled. Grappling in the dirt, limbs tangled, but Verith was stronger, more trained. She pinned Syrah, knife raised, Kale fired. The shot took Verith through the side. She fell, twitching. Kale pulled Syrah to him, heart pounding. Breath harsh. He checked her for wounds, his hands moving faster than thought. She gripped his arms, trembling. "You came back," she whispered. "I always will." Behind them, Alari peeked out, eyes shining with fear and awe. Kale crouched beside her hands. "Gentle. You did good," he said. "I was scared. So was I." That night they buried the bodies, cleaned the blood, rearmed the mines. But something had changed. The desert was no longer just a graveyard. It was a home being defended. Soraya sat beside him on the ridge, stars reflecting in her eyes. "I'm tired of running," she said. "Then don't," he replied. "Stay with me." She didn't answer immediately, but she reached for his hand. He took it. Their fingers locked, and this time, either let go. The stars were quiet above the desert, twinkling like distant lanterns, ancient and untouched by war. In the heart of a canyon carved by time, Kale knelt beside a flat stone, his hands dirty from welding. He wasn't building a weapon this time, or a trap. He was welding a solar antenna to power a greenhouse module behind him. The rust-red land was changing. They were changing it. Soraya stepped into view, the child Alari at her side. The girl laughed as a blue-leafed desert flower bloomed open from the warmth of the emitter lights. Kale turned and smiled, more freely now. And she returned it just as softly. It had been 6 months since the mercenaries were buried in the sand. 6 months of silence, rebuilding, and stolen moments under a violet sky. 6 months of peace, but peace was always temporary. Kale heard at first barely a hum at the edge of the wind. A frequency designed to hide beneath radar. He stood sharply, pulled down the visor on his optic implant, scanned the horizon. 2 dropships, Federation. "Get inside," he said. Soraya's body tensed instinctively. "Are they hunting you again?" He shook his head. "They're not hiding. This is different. They're not coming to kill me." Alari clung to her mother's leg. Kale activated the perimeter sensors and walked up to the outer ridge, rifle slung low. Dust billowed as the first ship touched down, counted 6 armored figures descending the ramp, but none raised weapons. One stepped forward, unarmed, his face uncovered, an older man. Weathered and scarred like Kalen, another soldier who had outlived his usefulness. "Kale Sarin," he called. Kale nodded, "Depends on who's asking." The man smiled grimly. "Name's Commander Fez. I served with your father." That alone nearly made Kale lower his guard. "You're late," Kale muttered. "I've come to offer you a deal." Kale crossed his arms. "They usually start with a threat first." Fez nodded toward the canyon. "I see what you're protecting, and why you haven't left." The man paused, his gaze softening. "We know about the girl, and the one you call mate. She has a name," Kale said coldly. "Soraya? And the girl is Alari. They're the last of their kind. Genotype Z311. Project Resonance. Federation didn't just fail her, they tried to wipe her out." Kale clenched his fists. "I know." Fez stepped forward, "but some things changed. There's a fracture in command. The new directorate. They want to make it right." Kale barked a laugh. "So they sent a diplomat with soldiers, not soldiers. Guardians." Fez pointed back toward the ship. 2 of the armored figures stepped aside, revealing a pair of younglings, not Sharon, but hybrids, experimental like Alari. Children the Federation had once hidden in dark labs. Now freed. "I came to ask for your help," Fez said. "To teach them how to fight, how to survive, how to be more than what they were bred for." Kale said nothing for a long time. "Then, I have a daughter, a family. I won't risk them again." Fez nodded. "Bring them, we'll protect them." 2. Kale looked back. Soraya was watching from the entrance, Arms around Alari, he'd found something more than survival with her. He'd found the reason to survive. That night, they lay beneath the canvas roof of their shelter, moonlight casting silver across the floor. Ilari slept between them, arms sprawled wide, dreaming freely for the first time in years. Kale turned to Soraya. Her eyes were open, already watching him. "They want us to lead a rebellion," he murmured. Soraya brushed her fingers across his cheek. "They want you. They'll want you too, and they'll have to ask nicely." He smiled and her hands stilled over his heart. "What if we fail?" he whispered. She leaned in, forehead touching his. "Then we fail together." The next day, they packed everything. The garden, the power cells, Alari's books, Kale's weapons, Soraya's Jaren relics. All of it. Kale lifted Alari onto the dropship ramp as she looked back one last time. "Will it be safe there?" she asked. He crouched beside her. "It won't be easy. But you'll never be alone." She reached for his hand. He took it, and she smiled. When the doors closed behind them, it wasn't the end of their escape. It was the beginning of their return. 3 months later, Kale stood on the edge of a converted moon base, staring out at a training field swarming with hybrid children's urine. Human. Once feared, now laughing, running, alive. He'd taught them how to hold a rifle, how to disarm a drone, how to see themselves as people, not property. But it was Soraya who taught them how to sing. He could hear her now, tuned but radiant, singing to a group of children beneath the artificial sun. Ilari sat beside her, braiding a flower into her hair. Kale's heart swelled. For once, not with anger, but with purpose. Fess approached again, reading a datapad. "We've had more volunteers," the commander said. "Refugees, even humans, coming from the colonies. Word spreading. We've started something." Kale kept his gaze on Soraya. "She started it." "I just caught up," Fess chuckled. "You've always been slow with the good stuff." Kale turned, serious. "Will they come again?" "The Federation?" "Yes. Not tomorrow. Maybe not next cycle. But they'll come." Kale looked out across the young warriors. "Then we'll be ready." That night, after the sun lamps dimmed and the corridors echoed only with silence, Kale found Soraya on the observation deck. She was barefoot, a glass of synth fruit in her hand, eyes glimmering with starlight. "You're thinking again," she said without turning. "Always. You worry too much. I nearly lost you. Twice." She turned then, walked to him, wrapped her arms around his waist. "But you didn't." Kale bent down and kissed her, slow, deep. Not out of desperation, but devotion. She pulled back. Just enough to whisper, "You gave us more than a night. You gave me more than war." They stood there until the starlight faded and the artificial dawn crept up the horizon. From shadows and fear, they had built a home. From trauma, they carved hope. And from one desperate bargain in the desert, they made a future.